Hey guys, welcome back to Altcoin Buzz Spotlight. This is the show where we speak with entrepreneurs, innovators, and thought leaders in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space. We are introducing a lot of great new content here on Altcoin Buzz, including a totally new and rebranded Altcoin Buzz Spotlight interview segment. In fact, if you haven't already done so, you can check out Shash's interview with Harjit Singh of Human Protocol. We have all kinds of new videos and new video formats that we're excited to reveal to you guys. But today I am delighted to welcome John Trask to the program. John is the CEO of Dimitra, an international agri-tech, that's agricultural tech platform. It's already being used by 18 million farmers. It's already bringing in tens of millions of dollars of revenue and has already partnered with dozens of international governments around the world. Before we get started, guys, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to receive notifications. That way you never miss a new video from Altcoin Buzz. Hello, John, and welcome to Altcoin Buzz. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, Matty. Glad to see you today.
Likewise. So we have known each other for a few years. People are used to seeing Leia's face with these Altcoin Buzz Spotlight interviews. She's a little bit easier on the eyes, so my apologies right off the bat. But actually, we've had an interesting sort of intertwining few years in the blockchain and the cryptocurrency space. Can you speak perhaps to a little bit of your history in this space and what ultimately led you into the agri-tech industry?
Absolutely. I've started my career 30 years ago in crypto, and it wasn't cryptocurrency at that point. It was cryptography. And as I progressed through my career, I got into building business systems. Back in the mid-2010s, started to pick up some of the programming languages, started to pick up some interest in Bitcoin and in blockchain. And at that point, I was doing a lot of consulting in the supply chain space, working for the biggest consulting companies in the world. I had worked on, I would say, well over 100, approaching 150 projects, working with the biggest names in the world, implementing ERP systems and building applications to integrate with their systems. A lot of consulting led me in the direction of consulting on blockchain, building blockchain. So I started a company called Blockchain Guru and went around the country speaking about blockchain and promoting blockchain. Probably built over 30 blockchain applications in that 5-year window. And that led me into where I am today with Dimitra. So it's been a pretty exciting ride.
Now, looking at your mission and some of your goals, specifically Dimitra is aiming to increase yield, reduce cost, and mitigate risk. When we first spoke about Dimitra, I was totally unfamiliar with the state of not only agricultural tech, but really agriculture in general. I don't know much about the space, let alone the new developments when it comes to fintechs applications within agriculture. Maybe if you could set the scene a little bit and sort of frame the landscape of agri-tech today. In relation to those goals that Dimitra has, what are the pain points in this sector that Dimitra is trying to solve specifically?
Yeah, so when we look at the agricultural world, everybody in the world needs to eat. It's one of the biggest verticals in the world. If you look at agriculture, the food chain and its related supply chain. Right now, there's about 610 million farms in the world. The average farm has 5 or 6 family members that tend to work on it. So we're looking at well over 3 billion people. And the agricultural market is bifurcated. There's 2 key areas in the agriculture market. There are the large mega farms, typically in the Western world, America, Western Europe, even in some of the larger, more developed countries in South America and Asia. And they represent 30 or 40 million of those farms. And then you look at the rest of the world, and there's about 570 million farms that we call smallholder farms, typically under about 4 hectares in size, but they produce about 70% of the world's produce. And when I look at those farmers, they've been very underserved by technology. And so one of the goals of Dimitra is, how do we help the smallholder farmer increase their yield? How do we help them reduce their cost? And if you look at these smallholder farms around the world, there is a large adoption rate, or a very high adoption rate, of cell phones. Farmers tend to be remote. They're not located in cities. They have their knowledge passed down from their parents. But there's been so much research in farming. There's been so much development in farming in the last 10 or 20 years, and productivity has been boosted around the world. But one of the challenges that the smallholder farmer has is they haven't had access to that latest research. They haven't had access to the latest technology. So, I'll give you an example. You look at an average farmer in a smallholder farm in any developing nation outside of the G7. And typically they're running their 2, 3, 4 acres, whatever it may be. They're producing a number of crops, and they're consuming, between themselves and their immediate family, cousins, uncles, aunts, about 80% of what they produce. And as they produce that, they take the other 20% to market. When you start studying these farms and understanding the challenges that they have, they're not using the latest irrigation practices. They're not using sustainable practices for soil management. And what it does is it drives their productivity down. And potentially their productivity on a farm like this may be 50% of what we would typically see in North America. So we can remedy that problem by helping with education and helping with technology in order to take specific measurements and make recommendations on how to increase output. Now, the really cool thing about what we're doing is, if we can increase one of those farms from 50% of world-class yield to 60% of world-class yield, we're in essence raising their output by about 20%. And that, because they're only taking 20% of their crops to market, doubles their income.
Wow.
Think of the value we can create if we can move past that 20% improvement to 30 or 40 or 50% improvement. And that's what really gets me excited about what we're doing. Because as we start rolling out the system more and more to different farmers in different countries, we can see the impact that it's having on the lives of smallholder farms.
Absolutely. And people throw around the term blockchain. It's that sort of undergirding technology that has all these emerging applications that are now starting to be developed, and some very impressive ones. And for one reason or another, I think people have gravitated, developers and entrepreneurs have gravitated toward the financial world, which is fine. There's all these stores of values and asset qualities that we associate with blockchain, and by extension cryptocurrencies. You mentioned that proliferation of cell phones. That really is something. It's a trend that's being exhibited all over the world, and I think many of the innovators in this space have seen that trend, and they've applied that to this idea that we're going to be banking the unbanked. Now, that's a noble pursuit, and that's a perfectly great mission to have, because that's another pain point, if you will, of the world today. But it's amazing how much latent potential exists at this level of agriculture, which is not often associated with blockchain. It's not one of these applications or use cases that people commonly talk about. We hear about banking the unbanked. We hear about DeFi and decentralized finance. There are some sort of discussions to be had about politics and voter integrity in terms of blockchain-based elections, that kinds of thing. But agriculture really seems to be this massive new frontier that's just perfect for this technology. And I do want to highlight the fact that Dimitra it's hardly like a conceptual company at this stage. We had talked about some of the numbers in a previous discussion. This is not sort of a brand new startup. You guys have already had a tremendous amount of success. Maybe, John, you can speak to the current state of the company, the growth that you've already enjoyed and that you've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started our first round from a tech development perspective a couple years ago, and we went live on some projects back in 2020, and now we're growing. We're moving the needle globally. We've got sales teams in 60 countries. We're in discussions with about 71 nations. We've locked down over $20 million in sales. We've got a pipeline that'll take us to over $100 million in sales within about 12 months. And we've got some really cool projects that we're working on around the world and really making it a difference in countries like India and Uganda and Bangladesh. So I'm excited to be able to talk about that and share a little bit about those projects and some of the results that we're seeing, and really a little bit more about our mission and what we're trying to achieve with these farms. You're absolutely right with respect to the proliferation of cell phones around the world and the capabilities that give people. Bank the Unbanked is a very popular platform and absolutely needed around the world. You look at this group of farmers, and not only do they have a problem with not having a bank account or not having an identity, but they don't have access to information. They don't have access to machine learning and artificial intelligence and satellites. And we built our platform on blockchain, but we're layering all these technologies on it. And the layering effect is what really drives value for them. So not only are we an ERC20 token, but we've got a blockchain base, and we're using Hyperledger, and right now we're exploring other methods in order to decentralize and democratize the access to farming tech to farmers around the world, and not just have that limited to the people here in North America or in those G7, G8 nations. So it's a lot of exciting work that we're doing today.
And from an outsider's perspective, from the layman's perspective, like I said, I don't know much about agriculture, let alone the agriculture tech industry. But it seems to me you found a solution whereby those countries outside of the first world, you mentioned North America, but those countries that are most impoverished, most able to benefit from this tech, now have a vehicle and a mechanism through which to best optimize and really change their fortunes going forward, if that's fair to say.
Yeah, and I think they've always known that they can. The reality of a lot of these nations is they have some of the largest populations in the world. We're dealing with India. We're dealing in Africa. Huge population, very reliant on agriculture. Some of these countries are 60% of their GDP is agriculture. You know, they're not developed in the software development business. They're not developed in manufacturing.
Right.
Their business is around making food and producing food for the world. So we see lots of opportunity with that. We see lots of growth, and it's a very broad supply chain, right from preparing your field through picking your crop and then getting it on a truck to a market or to a port through export. And, you know, we're working on projects around the world where we see these crops moving from South America or Central America to my table here in Canada. And there's a lot of effort. There's a lot of quality that has to be managed. There's a lot of food safety issues and food security issues. And we have to manage all of those issues. People around the world are more and more interested around where does their food come from? Is it being managed well? Is it organic? And there's just so many layered factors that are being introduced to the supply chain that technology plays such a huge role in managing those issues and solving problems along the supply chain. So we're really happy to be part of that. When I break the supply chain down, I look at upstream supply chain, which is the farm itself, and downstream supply chain, which is that whole logistics piece. We work in both spaces, but we really specialize in that upstream farm end.
So you mentioned tokenomics a moment ago. You mentioned India as far as a country that's very much going to be able to benefit from some of these solutions that you're providing. We'll touch on that in just a moment. But we're throwing around these terms, yield and optimization, and I'm wondering if you can speak to the technology, like at a technical level. What is the technology that is enabling this, both sort of at the macro level and in terms of the end user, which are going to be many of these farmers?
Yeah, so at a very high level, all of the end users, all of the farmers typically don't have access to laptops or PCs. They're generally mobile based. So we have an Android mobile platform. We're currently building an iOS mobile platform. And that's really around creating a mechanism for user input, allowing that farmer to communicate with the system and provide us with information so that we can analyze that and send back reports that'll help them improve their performance. And then on the back end, what we have is a number of factors. So one is identity. Identity is always an issue around the world. So maintaining secure identity on a blockchain is critical as to what we're doing. We have a points program for the farmers, and the points roll up happens to ERC20, but we're doing on-chain calculations from a roll-up perspective to manage farmer points and user points. And then we're working with, on the back end, data lakes and machine learning, artificial intelligence, drones and drone imagery, satellites, satellite imagery, IoT sensors. We're using many different types of sensors around the world on livestock or on soil or on crops. And then we're ingesting data like weather data and topography of the land and historical data that's available to us to help the analysis and help machine learning really provide insightful, data-driven information to the farmer so that they can make better decisions and increase their yield.
I remember something you had mentioned in a previous conversation was, there are so many of these phenomena, problems that I was totally unaware of. You mentioned cattle theft, and just that simple implementation of IoT devices, synchronization, between those devices, and in the case of some of these farmers of more modest means, they often still have that cell phone, but just being able to track something as basic as the location of a cattle goes a long way to solving problems that have been around for more, I was going to say generations, but really for millennia. These are age-old problems here that are being solved. Yeah,
cattle rustling is a huge issue around the world. And maybe it's not so prevalent in the US anymore, but it's still very prevalent in Africa and Asia, and for lots of reasons. You look at the wage disparity between people in East Africa and North America, and if somebody steals a cow there, they're gaining maybe a whole year's income or more, depending on the value of the animal. There's large organized crime organizations around the world that are stealing cattle and literally loading them on a truck, maybe cutting the tags off the ear of the cow that are identifying tags, and driving them to market just kilometers or miles down the road and selling those cattle. And there's no way to identify who the rightful owner of that animal is. We have a bolus sensor actually that we can put in the cow, and it goes in the rumen of the cow or the stomach of the cow and floats there, and it's got a small chip in it, and the chip has an encrypted identification on it. And now if that animal shows up at a cattle market in the countries that have started working with us, the market can scan the cow and determine that it potentially doesn't belong to the person who's selling it and belongs to a person down the road. And if that farmer has the app, they can actually get an email to say that their cattle have arrived at the market. And in some countries that we're dealing with, they have cattle theft response within their police force or within their military. And, we are working on a program where we'll be able to advise those first responders for cattle theft to that there's a high risk based on our analysis that this animal has actually been stolen. Other issues with other types of sensors that we can put on animals, which still exist here. Sometimes the farms aren't all nicely fenced in and cattle roam free, and they can get many, many miles away from the farm. And, the farms near where I live at the end of the season, at the end of the grazing season, spend tens of thousands of dollars on helicopters going out and looking for their farms because they may be 10, 20, 30 miles away from base farm. And this can create great value for them in being able to find the position of that animal and actually look at the path of where it's gone and where it's been grazing. So loads of benefits, even beyond the cattle rustling. Everybody's looking for beef that, has been wild grazed and not on a feedlot. So farmers can use the platform to prove that and potentially get some extra dollars for that beef when selling it, because free grazing is a preferred method in a lot of areas of the world from a beef quality perspective.
I can imagine. And so to that point, you mentioned sort of adopting the perspective of the farmers. Dimitra has a farmer first design philosophy. I'm wondering if you can speak to that and perhaps explain how that ties into, at a practical level, the use of your application. How does that look like from the farmer's perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at the processes that the farmers go through, and we look at the elements of what they do on a daily basis to run their business. And we build that in from an application perspective. So we're looking to make it as user-friendly as possible. And Maddie, if you don't mind, I'm just going to share my screen and I'll show you the app right here.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going into a design tool. It's easier to go through than actually trying to emulate an Android phone. But essentially, when somebody logs into Dimitra, this is the screen. We go through regular login with phone numbers and email addresses, and I'm just going to flip through some of the design. We have a number of languages, and we're adding languages to the platform based on the countries that we're going to work with. And we have your typical multi-factor authentication and password reset. So as I get through that, this is the farm, and Edie, the farmer, can log in and see a section on my farm where they can register all of the information about their farm, set up their location, manage their geofences, so put geofences around particular fields of crops, set their goals and order their supplies, manage their invoices, manage their workers, manage their equipment, manage their maintenance. This is really around what are all the factors on the farm that a farmer has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And we're trying to put it all in one spot for them. And then if they're growing crops, we look at how do they prepare their soil before they plant? How do they manage weeds? How do they irrigate? What do they do for harvest? What do they do for storage? How do they ship and track? And if they have any abnormal observations around what's going on the farm, they can pick an observation. We've built out all of these sections with industry experts, PhDs, and farmers from around the world. One section I would say in particular where we have a partnership, ship and track, we're actually punching out on the ship and track to the Morpheus network. So Morpheus has been a good partner of ours on other projects in the past. And we do look at partnering with many, many more firms, many, many more crypto companies around bringing their technology to our client base. And having over 60 salespeople in the world, we want to be able to promote those products, and we're building our platform as an ecosystem. So as we build out that ecosystem, we need lots of great technologies, lots of great players who can bring us those technologies. And, we see the vision over the next few years of incorporating technology from many, many corporations, allowing corporations, crypto companies to build on top of our platform, and then they can reap some of the benefit from a revenue perspective, from a licensing perspective, and also get involved in that token. In my crops, when you go into soil prep, you can tell us when you're doing your soil prep, you can add the geofence, you can tell us what you're using for fertilizers, for tillage practices, and all of this data gets collected, and the machine learning starts to look at that. We have similar platform for livestock, and I won't spend too much time on it. We have a marketplace where farmers can sell their animals, sell their used equipment, and those marketplaces can be set up in each country with the specific goals. We have a finance platform that allows farmers to apply for loans. So we partner with banks around the world or crypto companies around the world who want to provide loans to farmers, and they can access our, soon to be hundreds of millions of farmers. Right now, we've got about 18 million farmers signed up, but they can apply for loans, manage their loans, make payments on their loans, take secured loans against the crop. So lots of different ways we can work there. They can store their documentation, veterinary reports, permits, government applications, and so forth. And then in each country, we offer to the country an opportunity to digitize their government services. So farmers don't have to drive into a central office. They can do their permit applications right on the phone. They can apply for government aid programs. They can schedule inspections. In some countries where deforestation is a problem, we can do deforestation filings. For example, in Brazil, in some of the areas they manage and say farmers must maintain 30% forest cover or tree cover. So we can actually measure those things using satellites and file that with the government to check compliance and help with a lot of issues around deforestation around the world. We have best practices in the knowledge garden. And then when they look at reports, we have satellite reports, weather reports, crop reports, livestock reports. So loads of information for the farmer. And this information can be very specific to their individual farm. We can take a satellite view of their farm and see how their soybean performance is doing, if that's the crop they're growing, how effective have their practices been, and then we can give them advice on how does that compare to best practice and what maybe should they do right now to improve their performance, or even next year to improve their performance if they've missed the timing or the cycle associated with that crop. So those are the basics of the platform. I think we've got hundreds and hundreds of screens and reports that are available, and we're selecting some of those partners who can really help deliver data. And some of those partners are coming out of universities and research institutes, government organizations. So loads of information. And that's the key to farmer success, is how do you take that farmer who really learned from their parents and maybe a little bit from the community and bring the best information to them so that they can make better decisions on their farm based on what we know about growing their specific crop.
Including dynamic and real-time feedback based on those conditions that you mentioned that are assessed, that are documented by satellite imagery and other tools. So that's very impressive. And if you do happen to be, by the way, a crypto, whether it's a partner of ours or you're a crypto company, an initiative of some sort, and you're involved in that borrowing, lending space, or maybe if there's a technology that you can offer that can help Dimitra grow to further scale out. John will list your contact information at the end of the video and in the description below. But now that we've seen the app, I think it's probably appropriate to dive into a brief discussion about the tokenomics. Because you've mentioned that this is more than a startup. 18 million farmers currently using the platform. You're projecting 100 million within a year's time, or I think you said by the end of the year. You're in dozens of nations around the world. So you've probably put two and two together, and you're realizing, I'm speaking to the viewer now, you're realizing that the tokenomics here are not about funding the initiative. The initiative is successful. It's already generating revenue. So maybe, John, you could explain more about what the tokenomics are when it comes to Dimitra and what the token truly represents, not sort of in the capacity of a funding model or mechanism, but in terms of the utility that it represents.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will correct you. 100 million farmers is our 5-year goal. And we're about a year into reaching that 5-year goal. So, we see us being able to move to 100 million farmers.
My mistake, it was 100 million in revenue. So that's still, not that it's any less impressive. I mean, these are big numbers, I think, any way you look at it. That's
right. We see ourselves in about next year at about $100 million in revenue. So, I look at the tokenomics of this, and we have a tokenomics model that we designed in order to create an ecosystem around the farmer. And every farmer in the world, every farmer in a developing nation relies on their community. Just like we rely on our community in crypto, farmers rely on their community in growing better crops and producing better livestock. And that community includes a whole bunch of people. It's corporations that sell seed and fertilizer. It's governments who provide knowledge, provide, in some of the cases, land to the farmers. It's not-for-profits and large organizations like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation who provide funding to increase yield to deal with some of the big challenges that we have in the world. So when I look at the tokenomics model, the first piece of that is the farmer. We have a farmer reward program, and we create an incentive for that farmer to use the system correctly. So when they perform an action correctly, they get rewarded with points, and the points roll up in a regular roll up to become available in Dimitra tokens. Now, the second factor is we have an ecosystem of suppliers. And in some cases, this ecosystem of suppliers already exists in these nations. And in some areas like sensors and drones and satellite, that ecosystem doesn't exist already. So, I'll give you an example. When we have a farmer go out and he is growing a particular crop, we may want to measure the soil quality. So we can see some of that from space. We can see some of that with drones. We can understand a little bit about that through an interview process or through the farmer providing data on the phone. But not every farmer has access to a good soil sensor. So we work in the nation and work with entrepreneurs who want to change their job, who want to go and work with farmers to get out and start taking soil sensor readings. And they can go out and the farmer can spend his points on getting that soil sensor operator out to take a reading and load it into his Dimitra platform. And as they load it into that Dimitra platform, we just get another piece of data that helps that farmer increase their yield or helps that farmer reduce the potential for disease.
Right.
And so now we've got a token transfer and growth or appreciation from that farmer to the sensor operator. And then we throw in some other pieces where every project, when we go in, we know it takes a year or so to make it sustainable. And it takes some training, and it takes some practice, and it takes some effort on behalf of the farmer. And we partner with governments, and this is great. So these governments will come in as an investor on a program, we will co-invest on a program, and then sometimes not-for-profits will come in and invest on a program, and we'll create a funding pool in order to get things going and make the project sustainable. So I'll give you an example. The first year, that farmer, he may not have ever seen a soil sensor, and maybe doesn't trust the technology, but he has some points and he doesn't know what to do with them. So he calls the soil sensor operator, and the soil sensor operator comes out, loads up the soil sample, does some analysis, loads it into the Dimitra platform. And as he loads it into the Dimitra platform, then takes that information, and the farmer gets a recommendation. And the recommendation may be, you need to add a ton of cattle manure to your 4 acres. And if you do that, you'll produce 20% more corn. So the farmer goes and does that, and essentially comes out that year and produces 20% more corn. Now he becomes a believer, and now the system becomes sustainable. And that farmer starts looking at other services. And there's so many services in the ecosystem that we need. So we're trying to motivate people to join the ecosystem. We have a grant program or an incubator program that is coming out of the token. And that incubator program brings companies with great agricultural ideas into the ecosystem. We've got a new partner down in Brazil, and this new partner has a nose printing technology where you can take a cell phone, take a picture of the nose of a cow, and it acts almost like a fingerprint. And that can help.
I've heard that. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and it's a simple solution that farmers may want if their cattle is ever stolen, and the authorities do catch the animal, or the animal ends up at market, and they want to be able to prove that animal belongs to a certain person. Well, he's got it registered on the blockchain, immutable record, with the nose print of the cow, and we can give access to the authorities in their investigation to show that nose print was taken some period before, because it's all time stamped and written to the blockchain.
Yeah. And
help with that investigation in order to return the cow to the rightful owner, because that cow may be worth $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. And some of these smallholder farmers only have 1 or 2 animals. That might be a whole year's income for them. So great feature. And so we've got this incubator program where we're offering rewards around the world. We've divided the world up into 8 regions, and we're looking for the most innovative AgTech idea in each of those 8 regions. We'll give a 10,000 token reward to each of those innovators and allow them to put their platform on our network, and they reap the rewards for doing that. So as that product gets licensed around the world, they get the revenue from that, and it helps expand the functionality of our platform. We were actually showing some of the functionality at a blockchain technology event for agriculture maybe a month ago, and was interesting. We finished it, and the CEO of the blockchain technology event came out and said, well, you guys certainly are the operating system for agriculture, probably the broadest set of technologies that he's seen in his life relative to providing services to farms. And we're looking through an ecosystem, through that family that we're creating, just to grow that more, because our goal is truly to help those farmers. A couple other issues that we've got, or not issues, points we have around tokenomics is we are offering staking. So we do have an active staking program. We have validator nodes, and our validator nodes are unlike typical consensus nodes, although consensus is part of it. Because of the data and the amount of data we're working with, we do want to maintain decentralization, but we also have to set up edge computing. We have a contract today in Uganda serving 4 countries in that region on a animal genetics research center around how can they, working through their breeding programs, help reduce disease and help improve the health of cattle. And there's a lot of data that we can collect from the cattle. But as we start collecting that data and we start collecting genetic data around the cows, the genome of a cow is about 3 gigabytes. So imagine as we go and into some of these areas where there's millions and millions of cows, the amount of data that's there. So we want to keep that type of data on the edge and then use the summary data and record that in a blockchain for that unique identification purpose. But on the edge, we can run it in a data lake and let, a cluster or AI cluster actually perform analysis on that and produce a report that is more ingestible by the application and easier to communicate. We've got agri-services providers on board, agri-finance I mentioned before, the government ministries, and we have another program where we're taking a percentage of the tokens and we are looking to use that to finance projects in areas where they can't afford to finance projects. We can make those projects profitable, but some of the governments and some of the farmer groups just don't have the money to get a large project off the ground. So we're actually incorporating overseas an investment corporation, and we'll be looking for other crypto companies and other investors to invest in getting some of these large-scale programs off the ground. And these programs can be absolutely huge when you look at them. So those are just some of the factors. We have about 14 or 15 multipliers that we use in our tokenomics, which drive demand for the token over time. So we're looking forward to getting that going. Our token's coming out on September 15th, and we're building in those mechanisms right now. So all of this rolls up and starts with that farmer demand, and then we move from there as we continue to grow. So it's really exciting to me what we've got going, and it's certainly going to make a huge difference in the global agricultural space.
So John, you mentioned India a moment ago. I think anecdotally as a country that really does represent so much in terms of these solutions that Dimitra is going after. Why don't you tell us about your involvement right now, your presence in India, and really how that serves as just a great example of what's possible with the technology that you're implementing?
Yeah, so India is very exciting for us. We've got a couple contracts in India right now that are ongoing and will be ongoing for many years and hopefully decades. Our regional director there has been doing a great job. So shout out to AJ, who's running that region. One project in particular, we're working with a group of farmers, and this group represents about 1.3 million farms in India. And India is truly an agricultural nation. Much of the country is involved in agricultural processes. Much of the country is focused on not only feeding India, but feeding the world, one of the fastest growing nations in the world, over 1 billion population. So food is a big factor there. Over the years, and this is not a challenge that is unique to India, this is a challenge that's unique to the world. We've lost about 30% of our topsoil in the world, our good farming soil in the world.
Yeah.
It's been degraded for the last couple hundred years. As we industrialize and introduce mechanization and farming processes, we're certainly not good to our soil. And what's happening in many areas of the world is that the soil quality has been degraded to the point where productivity is quite low. So in India, they recognize this problem, and the Chamber of Commerce for Industry and Agriculture has contracted with us in order to help them solve this problem. We have an amazing team of soil scientists, We've got soil scientists from Africa and the UK and India and North America who've been studying different elements of soil and how to make soil productive while using it sustainably. So we're starting this project knowing we can't go to 1.3 million farms with satellite analysis. So we are looking down from the sky and we're seeing what can we see around soil. And there's lots of great things we can see. Organic content, we can see NDVI, we can see moisture levels. So there's a lot of information that we can start extracting on the farms. And that allows us to let the servers, let the processors do their work and do a high-level analysis of these 1.3 million farms. Then we're actually taking an army of volunteers in India, over 1,000 people who will give soil sensors. And they're going to go out probably for a period of at least a year and start sensoring this soil. And again, we still won't touch 1.3 million farms. We may get 10 to 25% of those farms analyzed. And then our application, the farmers are producing or entering data each day around their farming practices, around what they're observing around the soil. We're asking them specific questions that help the soil scientists, satellite scientists, and machine learning experts analyze that data. So we can take buckets of data, weather data, topography data, farming practice data, measurements that are taken on the ground, and satellite measurement. And what we do is we let machine learning take a look at that, and we come up and segment and categorize each one of those farms into a soil type. And each soil type then gets a plan that tells them how do they remediate their soil and increase their output at the same time. So now 1.3 million farmers will receive those recommendations. And then in the future, we'll continue to run the program so that we're evaluating that soil and continuing to give recommendations. Because as a farmer remediates their soil past a certain point, their plan needs to change. Their priorities need to change. Maybe their goals have changed around the crop they want to grow, and different minerals or nutrients are required in order to effectively grow that crop. So this in itself will be the largest soil analysis project that the Earth has ever seen. Wow. And we're taking that, we're using the ecosystem, and we need a huge ecosystem of partners who can help us with that. We're looking at tons and tons of data, 1.3 million farms, tens of thousands of acres, or tens of millions of acres, data from space, data from sensors. And there's going to be gaps in the data, and we're going to have to make decisions and refine that plan over the years. And we're creating this in an automated fashion. So we can take that not from the 1.3 million farmers, but take that out to those 570 million farmers that are our target.
Right. Yeah.
And so as we go, we expect, and we're already talking to nations about replicating this project and replicating the learnings in other countries. So today it's 1.3 million farms. The goal in the end is we're moving our platform to 100 million farmers in 5 years, which is almost 20% of the farms in the world. And we just want to continue to make an impact. And projects like this are super exciting to me because we're stretching the boundaries of science. We're taking what we know from 100 years of studying soil, and we're making correlations to sensors, we're making correlations to satellite, and we'll keep moving this forward. And the goal in the end with this is, how do we double the income of those farmers? How do we move this program forward and use that to solve big world problems? And it's amazing how much impact smallholder farmers have on the macro problems the world is trying to solve. soil degradation is a problem, but soil degradation and organic content in soil is related to carbon levels. It's related to global warming. As we repair and heal our soil using the platform, this will have an effect on global warming, on reducing the effects of carbon. And we've got a number of other issues. Now, if we're doubling the output of a farm or increasing the output of a farm 20%, think about the world today. There's 1 billion people in the world that go hungry every day. And some of that is because of distribution and poverty, but some of that is just a lack of product. There's not enough food in the world for people, and it's not in the right places. In some of the countries that are very drought-stricken, they have hunger problems. And if we can help select the right crops and grow more crops in those countries, we can help fight hunger in the world, climate change in the world, poverty in the world. Think about those 3 billion people who farm in the world and what percentage of those are impoverished. Doubling their income is going to make a significant impact on their social development, on their access to medicines and food and good nutrition. And that's the exciting part about this. Not only are we helping that farmer increase their income, not only are we helping that farmer increase their output, but these farmers, by and large, beyond driving vehicles, this may be the second largest group from a carbon production. The production of our food takes mechanization. It creates carbon. It reduces organic content in soil. It deforests our forests. And this is the balance that we're trying to play in the world. And Dimitra is a tool that helps maintain that balance. So those are some of our goals, and they're really big goals, but you and I have known each other for a while. I don't do things small when
I think you have a problem with ambition. You guys have to step it up. Well, this is, in hearing your response, it's the sort of thing that, although I think your baseline goals and ambitions are lofty, sort of as is, it's the kind of thing that when it all comes together, to your points that you made, this is that sort of project that is worth more than the sum of its parts at the end of the day. It opens up new research. The data sort of can be used in all kinds of different capacities in very meaningful ways. At least that's my understanding right now. So that part of it in and of itself is very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. The data is a gold mine, and making that data available to researchers so that they can progress research in all of these areas that we're talking about, not just agriculture, but climate change and other areas, creates value. And it does create value for the token holder, and it does create value for the corporation, because
sure,
we can find off-ramps for that data, and that data will also help us generate revenue and fund getting more farmers on, which again creates that cycle and helps us continue to grow the platform. So it's a self-fulfilling cycle, but in order to get that cycle going, we need that ecosystem. So that's our goal today, is how do we build that ecosystem and grow that ecosystem? And I think you're a great part of that, Maddie, in helping us get the message out, because we need to get out to all of these people who not only invest, but they have corporations or working corporations and supply chains and food chains and grocery chains. It's amazing the interest we're getting. Like, we have, I think, 71 projects right now that are in discussions that I think we have at least a 50% chance of winning. And it's very exciting. I've built a lot of businesses. I've had some successful businesses. This is the cherry on the top of the sundae. I think, this business could be the most impactful business that I've ever worked with in my life. and I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to work with all the great people we have. We've got over 100 people on the team right now, and that's continuing to grow. I think we're hiring 20 more this month. So we'll continue to add people to not only our team, but to that ecosystem.
That's terrific. Congratulations. To whatever small extent we can help you move the ball forward, we're happy to be a part of that. And once again, if you're a developer in this space, if you're behind a crypto project that you feel could lend a hand to John and his team and their mission, then we'll list, John, your credentials and your contact info at the end of the video and in the description. You've certainly got a lot going on. I think that's an understatement. In looking at Dimitra's roadmap, you can find that on the website. It extends up until 2023. What are some of the other upcoming highlights that people ought to be excited about with regards to this initiative?
Well, I think, the most imminent one right now is the token release. So our token is going live on exchanges in September. September 15th is our target date. We're running a pre-sale right now, so people can lock in and get the token at a discounted rate right now. And we've got an IEO starting with one exchange starting August 15th, running through September 15th in the Middle East. That's Emirates. And we've got 2 more exchanges right now that we're working out the details of the IEO. So you'll be able to watch our social media and see those get announced in the next week or 2. And I think, beyond that, you look at the excitement of some of these implementations. We have this large genetic platform that we're building right now. The base system was already up and running on the livestock side. We've got a launch for that in December. That's already been contracted on a multi-million-dollar contract in East Africa, and we're looking to expand that around the world. We're talking to animal genetic and breeding centers around the world on that. We've got our livestock platform, which is already functioning. We're building version 2 of that. Once version 2 is complete, we'll be launching that as a SaaS model around the world, so it won't be just in large farming organizations. And then we just have a lot of exciting work in the satellite space and in other spaces like particular crops, where we're working on deals with different countries or different organizations to work on specific staple crops that really are impactful in particular nations.
So, John, this is really one of those projects that I guess this has been the theme of the discussion, but there seems to be so much latent potential in this sector. You talk about the size of agriculture as it exists today, and insofar as far as blockchain goes, it seems to me that we've only really begun to scratch the surface of that sort of convergence of paths, blockchain and AgTech. It almost boggles the mind. Where do you see this going? Assuming things go well, assuming Dimitra continues to be successful, where do you see this company in 5 years, in 10 years? Where do you see the landscape? How do you envision its impact down the road?
So, I look at blockchain, and I'm always bullish on blockchain. I've been pro blockchain for years and years. Agriculture, I started in agriculture on my grandfather's farm years ago, moved to tech, and now have moved back to agriculture in my adult life. And I look at agriculture and the food chain and supply chain as potentially the biggest vertical in the world. Supply chain itself is a huge area. And then I look at Dimitra and I say, how do we make Dimitra fit into this? And we're really focused on that upstream area, and then tying into good partners in the downstream area like Morpheus and some of the other people we're working with. I've got some goals, and I see ourselves in the next year or 2 being over 100 million in sales. Our 5-year goal is that we'll be over $1 billion in sales, and that ecosystem will continue to grow. And the ecosystem is not just the revenue portion that we're working with, but it is the revenue portion of the entire ecosystem. We want to build those partnerships because the success of the farmer is reliant on the community. And we're in the age of the community. Crypto relies on the age of the community.
Oh, yes.
And making farmers successful needs that same focus. So Dimitra, the crypto token, Dimitra, the platform, it is about community. And how do we blend a community while moving these projects forward that, one, create revenue, but two, create the ability to expand the technology and learn from all the greatest researchers in the world how we can help farmers. So, I think that's where we're going.
It's a very fertile space, no pun intended. We're going to have you back certainly in a few months' time. You'll have to update us as far as how you're progressing by your own measurements. You're already surpassing some of the goals that you've set for yourself. So congratulations on everything so far, John. We look forward to checking back in with you to track your progress over these next few months and years. Look, in the meantime, I'm sure there are plenty of our viewers that are keen on either learning more information or getting in touch with you or following you. To that end, what exactly would you like to share, and where would you like to direct those viewers?
Yeah, I guess, the first place is I would put you onto our website, dimitra.io. And then we have Telegram channels. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit. So we can provide a list of all of those links. And please feel free to follow us. Open some good conversations with us and tell us about your favorite foods. Tell us about your farming experience. We're going to be running a meme competition in the fall and doing some fun things to bring people into the ecosystem. So join us on our social media, and please follow us and never hesitate to reach out. Lots of people on the team who would be happy to help you with any questions you have about the project, and please feel free to reach out to me directly.
So guys, check out all of those socials. Be sure to follow Dimitra. All of the information will be linked to in our description below. John Trask, thank you so much for joining us on Altcoin Buzz Spotlight. We wish you continued success with this very exciting initiative.
Thanks, Matty. I really appreciate you having me here today, and look forward to my next trip to Montreal, and we can get a beer.
I'll have a poutine as well. Thanks, John.
All right. Thanks. Take care.